Hey, what's up, guys? The East Marathon continues. In the previous two episodes, we brought the spotlight over to the latter half of the East timeline, but now, let's rewind the clock all the way back to Adol Kristen's very first adventure in the land of ancient East itself, hence the name of the series, East. I guess they just kept it as East after because I don't know, the names of the future lands don't quite hit as hard. Like if East 3 was just called Felgana, or Celseta, or Seiren. Doesn't quite bring a lot of excitement, huh? Getting back on topic, we're going to be reviewing East 1 and 2 today. And these games have had multiple different remakes and re-releases throughout the years. Almost kind of an absurd amount considering how niche this series is in the first place, but, you know, hey, I'm not complaining. It's more East, I mean, come on. Anyway, there's one for the TurboGrafx 16 CD, there's like East 1 came out on the Master System, there's a port to Nintendo DS, the list goes on. But for this review, I'll be playing the PSP version, East 1 and 2 Chronicles, which was then ported to Steam sometime later. And before we start, no spoilers, yada yada, you'll know when they come up, so let's just get started. Alright, let's see, we start our adventure with, wow, what a surprise. Adol is shipwrecked, gets discovered, rescued by someone, this time it's a dude by the name of Slav, and he wakes up in yet another unfamiliar land. I know this was the first time it's happened, but these reviews are taking a common theme here. Anyway, this time he finds himself on the island of Asteria, and it doesn't take long for Adol to stumble across a large town surrounded by stone walls. I believe this place is called Manure. I don't know. I'm so bad with these pronunciations, dude. It's here that Adol meets with a fortune teller who asks him to find and collect the Books of East, which document the downfall of the ancient society. Adol is like, sure, why not? And that's it. That's the entire goal of East. Just find the books. In East 2, well, that's kind of an issue because East 2 and East 1 are directly tied. It's probably the only games in this series that are linked to each other, so I can't even talk about 2 without spoiling 1. In fact, I can't really talk about the plot in general because all the cool shit starts near the end of East 1, and that means, you know, spoilers. So to keep it spoiler-free, just know it's a pretty good East plot, has everything you'd expect right here in the first entries in the series. There's mystery, intrigue, decent characters, quite a lot of lore, and adventure. And that's a huge thing I think this game gets right, is adventure. I know I say that a lot for this series, the adventure, but East 1 and 2 in particular, there are just so many moments where the game just says, stop whatever you're doing, just no plot, get that out of here, just get out in the world and see what it has to offer. And that's a huge bonus for this game. On many occasions, I felt completely lost in exploration, running around, killing waves of demons, and finding a ton of cool new shit. It was to the point where I'd kind of forget what was happening in the story, and I just want to get out there and see what new location awaited me. It also helps that this game is backed up with surprisingly good atmosphere. I remember specifically climbing up Darm Tower, and you can just see the world below getting ever smaller, and the sun in the background is beginning to set, and there's just a point where I had to stop, just look at what was down there, and think, man, look at how far I've come. And I think the soundtrack in the background really sells that feeling too. And there are many highlights like this, but I think that was really the standout for me. The atmosphere is wonderful. But how is the gameplay in this game? Well, you know what, let me just start from the beginning here. East 1 and 2 is a little bit primitive in the sense that it uses this combat system. It's a very strange combat system. It might be unique to Ys, where you just run into enemies to do damage. There's no attack button. You just bump into them. They call it the bump combat system. Hey, you know what Ys gamers say? When you can't bump in the sheets, you bump in the Ys. You know what I'm saying, guys? Get it? Because we get no women? But in all seriousness, the bump combat system is, well, it's certainly dated, but it's surprisingly pretty fun at times. And there are sub-items that you get that will help you out in your journey, that kind of mix things up a little bit. In Ys 1, you pick up these rings that will affect your attributes, like double your defense, slow down enemies, double attack, allow you to heal, standing still in dungeons. But Ys 2 takes this to the next level by incorporating actual magic that you can use. You can cast fireballs, you can change Adol's entire form into different creatures. Later in the game in Ys 2, you get this fucking time stop ability, and I swear, it's like the most satisfying thing in any Ys game. Allowing you to stop time and just run through packs of enemies completely unopposed, and then when things go back to normal, they all fucking explode simultaneously. It is actually the coolest shit in an Ys game. And the magic isn't just for fun. They do use it to make the boss fights a lot better. And that brings us over to the boss fights. And I'm going to tell you right now, the boss fights in Ys 1 are mostly kind of rough. The majority of them aren't horrible, but they just aren't that interesting and rather easy. But when this game comes out swinging, let me tell you, fuck. I'm sure people who have played Ys 1 remember this guy, this dude who transforms into a pack of bats. I swear, it's all a game of luck. Sometimes you just can't avoid taking damage. It sucks. Bad boss fight. And none of the boss fights in Ys 1 were that great, to be honest. But in Ys 2, they were quite a bit better. And because of the better boss fights and the inclusion of magic, I'm kind of inclined to hand the victory to Ys 2 when it comes to gameplay. But they're both very similar. If you don't like bump combat, if it seems a little too primitive, you might not enjoy the gameplay here. The bump combat system definitely has its flaws. It's probably not going to be for everyone, but I think this game has a lot of redeeming factors outside of the combat. You know the drill by now. Ys games, they have dungeons. What's an Ys game without dungeons? And the most notable thing about the dungeons in Ys 1 and 2 is that they are kind of labyrinth style. Some are definitely worse than others, but generally you might get lost exploring these places because there's so many different pathways. There's a lot of places to look, and sometimes they look similar to each other, so you might get easily lost looking through these places. When I first played through Darm Tower, I thought that was going to be the worst, because that dungeon is insane. There's like 24 floors or something like that, and they require you to backtrack through it, and there's all different winding paths and stuff, and so many optional routes. It's kind of crazy. I thought that was going to be the worst. But then they bring in Solomon Shrine in Ys 2. Whoa. Yeah, that's a labyrinth. Solomon Shrine is probably the closest thing in a video game to, like, the mazes on the back of fucking cereal boxes. But I actually really like those labyrinth-style dungeons. I don't mind them. If I had any other issues, I don't know, the game is maybe a little cryptic sometimes. A little. I'm gonna be honest here, I'm probably just too stupid to figure it out on my own. It's probably not cryptic at all. But I did use a guide sometimes. I'm not ashamed to admit that. But it's not nearly as cryptic as some other games, so it's not too bad. Okay, you know the segment. We're here. How about that soundtrack? I don't even have to explain this one. Just listen. It's pretty fucking amazing, right? It is pretty amazing. Anyways, now we're gonna do the spoiler segment. We're gonna talk about some of the more interesting aspects about Ys 1 and 2's plot, twists, the endings, that kind of jazz. If you haven't played the game, get out. I'll put a time code up if you want to skip the spoilers. Here. Okay, let's go. Alright, you know who appears for the very first time right here in Ys 1? That's right. It's my boy Dogi. And they drop in like a Super Smash Brothers style intro with him breaking through a wall. And let me tell you right now, you'll see this happen a lot in the future. I'm glad they decided to make Dogi Adol's partner for the future games. I don't know, he just kind of stands out compared to the others in Ys 1. Like, there's more to unravel with this character, which we get to see a little bit later in the series. Exploring deep into this shrine here, we find a cell with a blue-haired girl behind it, Fina. And that's another Ys trope, starting right here in the first game. So we escort her out, but after this, we don't really get to know what her deal is, besides the she has amnesia type of deal. Well, turns out, at the end of Ys 2, there's a revelation that she's actually one of the twin goddesses that rule over the land of Ys, along with another woman. I think her name is Rhea, and she's also another minor character that we just simply returned a harmonica to her. So I think it's kind of funny how Adol, he just like stumbles across extraordinary beings. Just, it's so casual. At the top of Darm Tower here in Ys 1, the main antagonist awaits. His name is Darkfact, and yeah, it's a silly name, but this dude is not playing around. This might be the most chaotic boss fight I think I've ever seen. But don't even bother dodging. Don't even try. Just go apeshit and try not to have the floor break under you. It's so absurdly fast-paced and ridiculous. I honestly, I have no idea if I love this fight or hate it. It's just so all over the place. It's kind of beautiful in a sense, but also bad. Regardless, Adol of course wins, and he gets the final Book of Ys. But this is actually only the halfway point, as Darm Tower blasts Adol into the fucking sky, and he crashes into the ancient land of Ys itself, which is now sort of a floating island, disconnected from the rest of the world. Alright, now, most men eating a fall like that would probably be, unrecognizable, but Adol doesn't take fall damage, he's too cool for that. A girl named Lilia does the rescuing this time, and after resting up and losing everything from before, the real adventure begins. You know, this random thought comparison just hit me. Ys 1 and 2, it kind of feels almost like Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Like, if you just play Sonic 3, you aren't getting the full picture. It feels incomplete, and it's the same thing with Ys 1. If you don't play 2, there's just something missing. Like, you don't even know what happens to Fina. Where Adol goes after her, you don't know the exact reason for even collecting these books of Ys in the first place. And Ys 2 provides a proper finale to both games. And that's why I'm actually reviewing these as one game. Because, you know, they really are just one game, at least in my head. Anyway, how about that ending? Is it any good? The finale has Adol facing off against Darm himself, the ruler of all demons and magic in the land of Ys. And Adol is also assisted by the cast of both Ys 1 and 2. Again, giving a sense of a proper finale to both games. But unfortunately, Darm himself is kind of a pushover. I do like the bullet hell style they went with here, but Adol is just way too overpowered by the end of Ys 2. So afterwards, since Darm is dead, the magic causing Ys to float is gone, and the land of East descends back into Asteria, and the two lands kind of reunite. And the rest of the ending is just the gang from the two games kind of they're like chit-chatting about the future with Adol. Adol and Fina also get some time to talk one-on-one. Fina clearly has feelings for my boy, but women and Adol, they're like the equivalent of that talking to a brick wall gif. I can sum up Adol's stream of thoughts right now. Grab Dogi.
Yeah!
Get on boat. The boat implodes. Adol wakes up on a beach. He saves the world, and then leaves all of his friends behind to repeat that same exact process. Now answer me this. Did you hear romantic relationship in that? Well, maybe not with women, but with adventure. All jokes aside though, these two actually share a rather touching moment, and I think it's one of the highlights of the game's story for me. It's also rumored that this might be the only woman that Adol actually fell in love with. So, hey, you know, that's pretty cool, even if it invalidates my joke before. There's actually a kind of sad moment at the very end of the credits. It kind of hits like a jump scare, like you don't expect it. But the twin goddesses, Rhea and Fina, they seal themselves with the Black Pearl. I assume this is probably for like an indefinite future. And the Black Pearl, it's sort of responsible for everything that happens in Ys 1 and 2. And it's pretty standard for Ys games to have a bittersweet ending. But this one kind of came in as a shock. I mean, like I said, it's only shown at the very end of the credits. And that's it. That is the end of Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles. I'm surprised by just how much story there was to cover here. Personally, I think this is one of the most interesting stories in the series. So far, it's probably overtaken by 8, that's a given. And maybe Ys 7 too. But in terms of behind the scenes lore, there's actually a ton even, to unpack. There's so many things going on that it can be hard to understand everything at first. I actually had to go to the wiki as like a refresher for this review. Alright, this review has gone on long enough. Let's conclude this bad boy. You know, I was actually kind of worried that this game would be a little bit dated and hard to go back to. And I have some good reasons for that. I mean, to be honest, bump combat doesn't sound appealing. And a story originating from like the 80s, yeah, that didn't hold a lot of promise for quality either. But I was pleasantly surprised on both fronts here. The bump combat is far from ideal, but I actually had some fun with it. Really, I did. Especially in Ys 2, where magic really helped mix things up. Certainly for the boss fights anyway. But where the gameplay really shines for me is in the adventure. I think there's something really special about how this game flows. Like I said, the dungeons are sprawling with so many routes and different places to look. And while some may not like the confusion that entails, to me it was almost mesmerizing. I just love getting lost in these places, what can I say? Having those close calls deep into a dangerous place, only to round that corner, find a chest with something really powerful in it, enough to turn the tables on your foes, and emerge into the light, victorious. It's such an amazing feeling, and I think it's a concept that I don't know if it was really recaptured nearly as well in later games. To be overwhelmed with the choice of where to go next. And this all rests on the backbone of an incredibly atmospheric and catchy soundtrack, and it gets that blood pumping. So yeah, while Ys 1 and 2 is flawed, I still think it holds its own against some of the future entries. It really is a great way to start off this incredible series. It is. And I think this game would be for you if you like adventure, if you like exploring, and if you're interested in a story with surprisingly deep backstory, especially accounting for future Ys games. If you run into this only wanting that balls to the wall, reflex-based action with those crazy boss battles, this is the weakest one we've covered so far in that area. but it's still phenomenal in every other aspect you love about Ys. So I think a fair score here would be 8.3. It's a very good video game, and if you're an Ys fan, or even just an adventure game fan, I really recommend this one. It's really good. But with that said, this review's over. You guys, take care.